Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. That's a little loud. I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for June 12th at 6:30 p.m. First of all, just a quick territorial acknowledgement. We are grateful and privileged to work, live and play on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, particularly the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, whose stewardship of this land continue to this day. If I can get a motion and seconder for the agenda tonight and the near term, or receipt of the near term. Okay, Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson, thank you very much. Any discussion, any errors or omissions? Oh, sorry. I don't think your name is Chris Shallow.
Oh, it's still up.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Sorry, I just noticed that Councillor Day's notice of motion from this agenda is missing from the near term agenda for June 26th for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion carried. Just mayor's message, just a few things here. First of all, I'd just like to thank Seacliff Properties and Reliance Properties for hosting the first Royal Beach. It was called a pub pop-up and held it this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And it was very well attended. It's just gives you a flavor of what's going to happen in the future down there. So they just put this pop-up and they hope to do this a few times this summer. Second thing, Arts and Culture Colwood is hosting the Flat Deck Musical Theater this Saturday, June 17th at 3 p.m. at Meadow Park Green. It's featuring a sneak peek of Theater El Dante, summer production of Tuck Everlasting. Just want to remind everyone that the National Indigenous Peoples Day is June 21st from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Colwood is pleased to be a sponsoring partner of the celebrations at Royal Roads University. Everyone is welcome to experience the canoe landing protocol, canoe challenge, artists, musicians, games, and food. That's all I have for mayor's message. Any councillors, any issue points? Okay, thank you. Adoption of minutes, may I have a mover and seconder to adopt the regular council meeting minutes held May 23rd as presented, and the following minutes be received. The Emergency Planning Committee meeting held on March 21st, and the Waterfront Stewardship Committee held on April 27th. Okay, Olson and Ward. Any discussion on any of these minutes? Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion carried. Okay, public participation. We had two written submissions that have been received prior to the agenda publication. They're appended to the agenda. And there's 7 written submissions that were received after the publication of the agenda, and they'll be appended to the agenda tomorrow. There's 2 parties that have registered to speak virtually. Actually, it's only one. I think the other one is live here. Oh. And before taking on any, I just wanted to get a feel for how many people from the gallery wish to speak tonight. I'm just trying to get an approximate number. 6, 7, 8, that's 16 minutes. Okay, so one individual has asked for an extra 2 minutes. So there's enough time. We have 20 minutes for public participation. So, and it's Miss Davis has asked for 4 minutes public participation. Can I get a motion? I need a motion, and we need unanimous approval by council. Councillor Grove and Councillor Jordison seconds it. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. So Ms. Davis, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I want to speak to agenda item 9.2, volunteer coordinator consultant. This is on behalf of Arts and Culture Colwood Society and our team. In review of the presentation and recommendation, we find the following comments and concerns. We find it confusing to determine what are the tasks of the volunteers you wish to recruit. Is it stated during the budget process that no extra spending would occur after the recent budget process? A full-time permanent FTE 84,000 for this task is a very, very hefty ask for a community our size. The initial ask is for 50% of the annual FTE cost and an additional one-time cost of 10,000 for a consultant. This year being funded from the general accumulated budget surplus, which has been accumulated, I understand, from prior years. Next year, it would be funded at the 91.5 level and funded by taxpayer dollars. Our not-for-profit recruits our own volunteers through events and unique relationships. Volunteers are the backbone of not-for-profits. It's a primary reason we exist, to bring community together with common goals. Our not-for-profit has a risk management assessment for our volunteers unique to our organization. We are unsure how the city would mitigate this type of recruitment for us. We are quite able to handle this on our own. Long-standing not-for-profits mentioned in this report as well have established working protocols to recruit volunteers. I believe that other municipalities have volunteers, not paid staff, who connect people who express an interest to volunteer with organizations that align with their passion and what is significant to them. The data set we find is isolated. A portion of the data set is flawed as it only includes city staff. It is confusing that Volunteer Victoria is cited with statistics of 26% increase of volunteerism in Colwood. We don't report to the Volunteer Victoria, so I wonder who else in the municipality of Colwood is not also reporting. So we believe this to be inaccurate. The statement implementing this plan as I've recommended would create capacity for the city to identify, foster and empower community groups to formalize and undertake volunteer activities that benefit the community and the participants. We are able to do this on our own. We really don't need help from the city to do this. And I think there's better ways to empower not-for-profits. Staff time is listed over and over in the implementation timeline, and I worry that this will exceed the values specified in Appendix 1, budget recap on page 15. Most of the organizations that I've worked with over the past 10 years consult with Volunteer Victoria, and I've been in the not-for-profit world and charity operations for that long. Having someone else coordinating and assessing volunteer engagement who does not have intimate knowledge of the missions of the many of the not-for-profits is worrisome for us. But perhaps the recruitment is really just for city departments, which I believe is already happening at this time. Quoted in the report, the City of Colwood may provide access to training courses, in-house or online seminars or local conferences when appropriate in the future approved by the volunteer coordinator. From my experience as an accountant for a municipality, this can be very expensive. I believe this approach is too big and too expensive, and I encourage you to keep it simple. We're a small community.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the first person online.
Greetings, Mr. Adams. If you would unmute yourself and address council. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Kobayashi and council members. I'm here for bylaw 10.2 for the land use bylaw amendment. If it's possible, I will speak very briefly at that time. Thank you.
Please. Yeah, do you want to speak now then, Mr. Adams? I'm sorry.
Yeah, certainly. I would just like, I'm actually not going to speak on this matter this evening. I would like you to register the submission from Cosimo Casal of Cosmopolitan Associate and include myself as a local contact along with Cosimo Casal and Rob Egan of Arbor Memorial for the for our submission of bylaw 10.2 so that you can refer to this matter with council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a second person that we have online? It's the same two though, are they not? Okay, Mr. Egan?
Greetings, Mr. Egan, if you can unmute and address council. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Egan. It looks like you're unmuted. Can you speak?
Yeah,
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, again, Rob Egan here. Again, part of the Arbor Memorial group, here to listen to item 10.2. And Nick Adams commented about the parts that I'd be here and interested in too. So that's about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Set it for online then, I take it. Okay. I'll ask anyone from the gallery, please come on up and please.
Carol Brown from Friends of Havenwood Park, and I'm speaking on a 9.2 on the agenda in regards to Colwood volunteering programs. For the last 7 years, I have been a member of Friends of Havenwood Park and have been a coordinator of this group for many of those years. Over these years, I have seen the value of such a group of volunteers in stewardship of a Colwood property. We work under the direction of the City of Colwood Parks Department, along with Habitat Acquisition Trust Act. As HAT has a covenant on the park along with the City of Colwood, HAT is able to allow us to use their volunteer liability waiver forms. From the City of Colwood, we receive assistance and direction as to where to best put our efforts. And the city also provides the service of gathering and disposing of the cubic meters of invasive plants we pull. The city and HAT make sure that we are all well trained, well outfitted with tools, vests, gloves, in order to do our volunteer work effectively and safely. Many of our members have expressed the desire to see this kind of citizen-driven volunteer stewardship be extended to other Colwood parks and other Colwood initiatives. And on that, I will end. I just want to say that the benefits that I have received and the other members are truly remarkable. And we also feel that the benefits to the city are truly remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors, Administration. My name is Roger Conrad, 309 Perimeter Place. I'm up here tonight because I'm asking Council to reconsider the motion that they voted on, which was unanimous, to put speed bumps on Lagoon Road. Although it's a temporary measure, there are costs associated with that temporary measure, and they are going to be removed. I would suggest the money that you're using for that temporary measure be put into design Lagoon Road properly, having well-established sidewalks with a separation area, maybe a cement separation median, and maybe consider, if your goal is to slow the traffic down, maybe consider traffic circles, or as I call them, circular median centers, which deflects the car around and really has a dramatic impact to slow them down. That way you can maintain the volume, and yet you are not going to impact the flow. Right now, by your own studies, if I can recall, you have 68,400 vehicles in a 10-day period using Ocean Boulevard. That is a lot of cars. So if you start putting speed bumps on Lagoon Road, you're going to divert or deflect a lot of those cars back onto Milburn and Hatley that you just put speed bumps on, and you put some planters in to eliminate them from using a neighborhood as a cut through. So for every action, there's an opposite but equal reaction, as you know. So by putting the speed bumps on Lagoon, you're just putting the problem right back onto Milburn. So I really think you have to consider that. We don't want to be known as a city of humps and bumps. But right now, South Colwood has 5 routes to get out of South Colwood. You have Veterans Memorial, you have Machosen Road, you have Milburn to Ocean Boulevard, you have Lagoon to Ocean Boulevard, and 3 of those streets, oh, pardon me, you have Wishart to the Old Island Highway. 3 of those streets now will have speed bumps on it, which is a little bit ridiculous, especially for arterial or feeder streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conrad. Just a clarification, Mr. Earl. I believe the sidewalks are going in this year on Lagoon. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. We're actively designing sidewalks for a portion of Lagoon for construction next year, I believe. I think Mr. Rosenberg is on the line, but we're still in the design phase, so construction would be next year.
Okay.
And that's for a portion
Right.
of Lagoon.
Thank you very much. Next person that would wish to speak, the council.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm just here to speak about the amendment for the properties on Souk Road. Seems like a good project. My main concern to do with that is with the low-income units. They're supposed to be 10% and they're be able to be bought off for a mere $1,500, which that does nothing to add to the fund to build some low-income housing or units. And what's happening here in Colwood, and I'm sure you're all well aware of this, is we have a shortage of employees. You go into any grocery store, including our brand new one. I went in the other night with only the customer service open. There's nobody to work here. Nobody wants to travel through the crawl to get here and work. And we have a serious problem already with the shortage of workers. The units that are brand new above Save On Foods start for a studio at $1,700 to $2,400. It's also something to consider in your parking because the units are so expensive. That's roommates, extra vehicles. People who drive their bikes to work still come home and use those cars to put their paddle boards on and head to the lake. And the more that a car is parked, the more the parking is needed. You know, they're not taking those cars during the day and leaving and other people being able to use those spots. So those are considerations. My main concern, like I say, though, is the low income. And we are becoming a very, very expensive city to live in. And we have a more and more of a shortage of employees to do the work that we very much need done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Oh, sorry, I skipped that word. Jean Elliott.
I actually knew who you were. I just had to do it for you. Thanks a lot, Jean. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members. My name is Pete Thompson, and I am a resident of Acacia Drive. I have been a resident of Acacia Drive for over 44 years. Acacia Drive has always been a very quiet, subdued neighborhood, people-friendly, child-friendly, pet-friendly. I believe that the adoption of the bylaw is going to have a negative impact on our neighborhood. Our main concern, of course, is going to be traffic. People coming out of that development are going to be trying to turn left onto Soup Road, and there's going to be terrible, terrible thing happen. Not today, not tomorrow, but it's almost inevitable. We have seen this already with the development at the end of Soup Road and Acacia Drive with the 3-story condos that have been built there. They were designed so that people could not turn left onto Soup Road, but had to turn right, go up to Corona Foods or somewhere and turn around to go back in towards Colwood. People don't do that. They turn left, drive the wrong way down the road until they get to an area where they can cross over and then carry on. It's a pretty dangerous situation, and it's happened more than once. I can see this is going to happen again with this development. It's not going to be as safe as everybody hopes. The other issue I have is the loss of privacy to the people adjacent to it, with suddenly having a 6-story building right behind them overlooking their backyards. The lack of sunlight from, again, they're going to block out a lot of sun. The lack of airflow, which is going to be directly affected by, again, 2 6-story buildings. I just want to vote and give my opposition to the bylaw amendment. Thank you very much for your time.
Very much. Next speaker, please. Mr. Willing.
Yeah, good evening, Your Honor. I'm Glenn Willing from 3434 Grattan Road. And councillors and staff, I believe everyone received a letter recently regarding the plight, or what I call the blight, of the Canada geese that proliferate the lagoon. These geese are not migratory birds by definition. They were introduced in about 1965 by Dr. Hatter, who had property over on Sydney Island, and they were brought in because there weren't enough geese to shoot. And these birds were not migratory, and they have expanded to the point where Mitchell's Farm in Saanich employs full-time, basically, hunters to come in and eradicate them because they can't grow their crops anymore. To put any closure on any stretch of the lagoon for a bunch of geese that don't really belong here, because the migratory birds, if you're familiar with them, especially geese, they only stop here on the way north or their way south. If there's inclement weather, things like fog or cold weather or whatever, they'll stop for a few days. Then they continue their journeys. These geese do not continue a journey anywhere else. They are a plight on every golf course, on farmers that try and put fresh grain in their fields. And I cannot support any part of getting involved in a goose parade, on top of which is another interesting story. These geese are coming down with avian flu. And the hunters know which ones have avian flu by the way they land. They land badly. And if you want to go down there and feed a bunch of bread to animals with avian flu, go ahead. But I say I want absolutely no part of any closure of the lagoon with regarding those birds. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Next speaker, please. You'll have to push the button.
Again, there we go. Hi, Mayor and Council. On that note, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Sarah. I am the one that submitted the letter regarding agenda item 7.1. I was using Canada geese as just a general example, as them being sentient beings. It's not by no means indicating that they're migratory species. As a biologist, I think it's time that we merge our stewardship accessibility with the lagoon, and we look at setting an example for our next generation of conservation stewards. There are lots of migratory species that utilize both sides of the lagoon, and there's this traffic that just comes and I've seen it for myself, run over birds for no reason. That's just not human. That shouldn't be human nature, and we should be setting a better example. So I just encourage there to be further discussion on how we can be a better community, better humans, and be the change and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other speakers tonight? Seeing none. Councillor Day, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a question for staff on the letters that we received to mayor and council. I know that, for example, I have a notice of motion, which I'm not trying to speak to, but there was a letter that was written from the disability committee to council, and it's not on our agenda. So is any letter that is addressed to mayor and council being included on our agendas, or is there a process being applied?
Thank you through your worship. So any kind of correspondence that's received from the public that requires council direction that staff can't assist with gets put on a council agenda looking for direction. I don't believe if they're requesting to put it on a council agenda. I don't believe the correspondence you were referring to was requesting to be put on a council agenda.
Okay, so I had assumed, I guess incorrectly, that when mayor and council receives a letter, that it would be put on our agenda for us to know about. So I certainly hope that we can address that soon. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Can move on to delegations. Seeing no other public participation, I'll ask Mr. Beckett come up and talk about Ukraine sister city agreement. I meant to get in the picture there. Oh, okay. Just a very quick sidebar story. So Ian reached, or Councillor Warren reached out to me. He assisted in procuring funds to allow us to buy this medical equipment. It just so happened that the Ukrainian surgeon was here. Yes, I'll just open the floor. And thank you very much for the great presentation, Bob. I really do appreciate it. And you've got to know Chief Beckett here. I mean, he's a phenomenal individual. I've known you for quite a long time. And, you know, if he's not in Ukraine, he was in Haiti. I mean, we're so proud of you, Bob. I mean, you are, you know, the model citizen that I aspire to be, that's for sure. And I just learned from Councillor Ward tonight, you know, he did tell me that he was doing all this stuff. He's such a humble guy, you know, so, and he says, well, I'm just like you, you know, do it without fanfare, you know, so incredible individual. So anyways, I'll open up the floor for questions. Councillor Ward.
Well, I was going to say you have my support, Bob, but I guess that's pretty clear at this point. But no, I really appreciate what you're doing, and certainly, Bruce, what you're about to do. And you know, I think it's just important for those in the gallery and those in the community to know that that your groups such as Help Ukraine Vancouver Island that are resettling refugees here, the primary place that these refugees are settling is here in the West Shore. This is where their new home is. So, you know, just on the weekend, I was speaking to a young mother from the city of Kherson, which is in the news right now with the dam and such. And, you know, she left home with just a backpack that was all of the belongings she could take with her 6-year-old daughter, who's now going to school over in Langford. So, but in SD 62, which, you know, we share. So, you know, this is close to home. It's real for many of us. I've got my own share of stories, but we'll save those for another time. But I think what you're doing is remarkable. And I think, you know, I'm but one vote, but if we as a city can get involved in a formal way and provide you support, you absolutely have my support. So thank you again.
Councillor Jordison.
Hi, Bob. I just had a question. I was just wondering like what the term of these arrangements usually are, and or is it like something you sign on for forever, or just like in terms of how you can be sister cities with other places as well? Like if you're with Ukraine, do you would you have an opportunity to be a sister city with another place, but still keep the sister city? Like how does it work typically? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Yeah.
And so when I investigated, found out that it can be a short term, it can be long term. You could have sister cities. Recognizing though that a sister city should not be something that is just a plaque on the wall. It must be something meaningful, tangible, and serve both communities. Certainly today, Ukraine needs their help. They're going to need help for many, many years to come. But again, more importantly, what is that opportunity for a long-term relationship that serves both communities? And in my mind, most importantly, serves the students of our community, those who will be our next citizens, those who will be the next citizens. So
Really, the question is for council to.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful idea, and since I'm seemingly the historian of council of late, we did have a sister relationship with a city of Shika in Japan for many years. I think it's listed, I Googled to figure out how long ago was that? The sister city arrangement was in place when I was first elected. I believe it started in 1999. It may have started sooner than that, but it offered us an opportunity to have cultural exchange. And Japan, it was a country that was particularly interested in sharing culture because of their wartime experiences as well. And for many years, we had annual visits from Shika, not always the council members. Sometimes it was other officials, members of their municipality in Shika. I have many gifts that I was given over the years to commemorate that relationship. And I think it is important to recognize other cultures and to see how much we're alike rather than how different we may be. So I think this is a great idea, and it will last the term of meaningfulness to both parties. But, families are big. We have many siblings, so let's keep in touch and see if we can make it meaningful for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, we have drafted a motion, a recommendation that staff be directed to put together a staff report to formalize a sister city with one of the Ukrainian cities. That is the recommendation that's on the table right now. Would anybody like to move that? Okay, Councillor Ward, second by Councillor Jensen. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mayor and
Thank you very
Council.
much.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob, just to let you know, I was pretty excited about a year ago. I took that 23andMe and I found out I was 9% Ukrainian. But my wife looked at it, she says, dummy, that's me.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'll keep on turning.
Yeah, and all of this.
So we can continue on. Sorry, just a little technical glitch there. Okay, item 7, correspondence regarding council direction. This is as a result of a letter that was written by Sarah Gibbins. And the recommendation is that the correspondence from Sarah Gibbins regarding Ocean Boulevard closure during avian nesting be received and that council provide direction. So I believe probably the best way to handle this is that it hasn't gone through committee yet. And I think I'd like to see this thing go through committee. So this is what my suggestion is. So anyways, do I have an agreement here? Does someone want to make a motion? Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that was my thinking that we could move a motion to direct this to the Waterfront Stewardship Committee and the discussion can carry on. There's members in the room tonight, so.
And Councillor Olson seconds it. Any discussion?
I think there's one written up, but we don't need to see it. It's pretty straightforward, right? But there was an element to it that staff look into implications of the environment, of course, but also, or sorry, the council, or the committee rather, looks into the implications of the environment and traffic. That was also written in the motion. Just specifically so that fills it out. Okay,
There we go.
yeah, thanks.
And Councillor Olson has seconded. Any discussion? Pretty straightforward. Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Okay, item 8, notice of motion. Councillor Day, Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, IFD. And I'll get you to read the notice of motion, Councillor Day. Thank you.
Red button. There we go. My motion that will be discussed at the next council meeting is that the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues become a standing committee or commission to meet the new accessibility legislation requirements with annual funding to be a line item in the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on. Under new business, we'll get to new business. Councillor Ward, if I can get you to introduce your motion. This was as a result of a notice of motion 2 weeks ago, tenant displacement assistance. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, this motion is commensurate with bylaws that have recently been undertaken or have been in place with City of North Vancouver, City of Saanich, Town of Sydney, Burnaby, and others, essentially looking to ensure that renovictions and demolitions and the such don't imperil those both in market and non-market housing and rentals. May or may not be applicable in Colwood, but hence the reason for the motion. So the recommendation before council is that the City of Colwood staff provide council with background and analysis regarding the potential for tenant displacement in Colwood. So that's the first part. And subsequently, if needed, propose a tenant assistance policy intended to guide council's decision-making in cases where rezoning applications involve displacement of residential tenants.
Can I get a seconder so we can discuss it? Okay, Councillor Jensen will second it. I'd like to open the floor for discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think this is a really good idea, but I think it's also important that we go into it with our eyes wide open. We have had renovictions in Colwood from assisted living environments where they have provided the option to return once the renovation was complete. However, it's very unlikely, and it certainly wasn't the case in the particular situation that I was aware of, when they were offered to return to the building after the renovation. The rents had gone up considerably, even though it was still an assisted living environment. The reality was that the costs had to be paid for somehow. And when they considered the return to Colwood, what ended up happening was that they returned to a different part of the Capital Regional District, where they were found temporary housing that eventually became permanent housing. So I think it's really important that we clarify in our plan and what we're looking to achieve. It's my hope that if you were living in Colwood and the organization that helps provide you with a place to live is doing a renovation, that they have an obligation to continue at a level that you could afford to remain in the community. Sadly, we lost a valuable member of our community in that particular exchange. I'm hopeful. I believe she has a good home in a different part of the CRD, but we no longer have the benefit of that person's participation in the many things that she did participate in.
Thank you. Councillor Jensen?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think this is timely. Some of our housing stock built around the time of incorporation or pre-incorporation. This is going to be more of an issue, I think, in this next decade. And entrenching some kind of, for lack of a better reference, a charter of, responsibilities on how these building owners are going to manage their tenants and their tenant displacements. Now, the only caveat I would add to this is I'd hate to see a building owner company not go forward with necessary remediation or renovations because they're inhibited in some way by this, by what it is we're contemplating here. I'd hate to see that people are living in undesirable conditions because it's too strenuous to make those necessary remediations. So I would love, I don't think any amendment or anything is necessary, but I just would love to see us make sure that we've dissected this all the way around and that it does meet with the needs of our residents and tenants, but also offers the opportunity and encourages building owners to remediate, reinvigorate their premises. I too am in favor of ensuring that tenants have some rights to come back to this community and this location. It's unreasonable to expect it's at exactly the same, median value, but I do believe the landlord tenancy branch has some legislation in that regard as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ward?
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. The more robust bylaws that are out there do, as Councillor Day was alluding to, have a right of first refusal component to them, many of them with a reduction. For example, Sandra is 20% below market rate as a right of first refusal for the previous tenants. So, I would trust staff, and planning to do the homework on why reinvent the wheel, I believe is an expression the mayor enjoys. So, there's a lot out there, I think, to draw from. And I think speaking to Councillor Jensen's point is valid. And I think we need to assess, which jurisdictions have had it in place for any length of time and assess, what the impact is on rezoning applications, renovations and such. But at the end of the day, though, with the cost of housing being what it is, and the folks that are most at risk, even in market housing in some of these units, I think it behooves us to look out for all members of our communities. So that's the motivation behind the motion for me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Earl, is the direction understand? Perfect. Thank you very much. Seeing no other discussion, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? That's unanimous. Motion carried. 9.2, creating a Colwood volunteer program. I'm going to hand it over to you, Sandra, Manager of Communications. Sandra Russell.
Is the mic working? Good to go? Okay. I'll just start. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to seek direction about the Colwood volunteer program. So the plan titled Creating a Colwood Volunteer Program was developed in partnership with Volunteer Victoria. And it's intended to lay out the steps required to create a volunteer program for Colwood. The City of Colwood, of course, recognizes that volunteering can be a life-changing experience that fosters community connectedness, belonging, a sense of accomplishment, and community pride. Colwood's 2018 strategic plan identified the need for a volunteer engagement strategy to guide the creation of a centralized volunteer engagement system. This has been reinforced recently through some of the council-led engagement, such as at the Ideas Fair and through the Citizen Survey, and even in the household prosperity study that we've received. Implementing the plan as recommended would create the capacity for the city to identify, foster, and empower new community groups and support existing groups. Recent strategic discussions and those engagement strategies have talked about opportunities for youth and for seniors.
for accessibility, for public art, neighborhood connections, good neighbor programs, and new community groups, gardening, environment. A lot of topics in our growing community are focusing on the need for more involvement of citizens. So I'll just run through a little bit, some of the points in the plan, key considerations. So a volunteer coordinator would create a structured system of policies and procedures to provide a framework that defines and supports the volunteers, the involvement of volunteers as we grow. Coordinated, so a person there at the city to support these systems. Goal-oriented, so it's supporting the goals of the volunteers as well as the goals of the city and the organizations who would support. Inclusive, so recruitment and selection processes that were intentionally reaching a diverse audience. Safe and skill building, so ensuring that consistent liability, insurance, orientation, equipment, all of those factors were considered and provided. Supervised, so volunteers were receiving appropriate supervision and had opportunities to provide feedback about the programs. Evaluated, so that we're continuing improving and ensuring the process is consistently applied. And recognized, so that volunteers are receiving support. For example, students receiving the number of hours so that they can add that to their resumes as they go forward. So some of the key considerations. You know that we have many partnerships to build upon, existing organizations who do a very good job of this already. There is a desire, and there's a list of a few examples. There are many more who already do a good job of this. Volunteer Victoria works with 250 organizations throughout the region. And so many of those are signed on with Volunteer Victoria, others are not. And we have a growing interest in this. We know that more people would like to do litter pickup or beach cleanups or gardening initiatives. Friends of Latoya Park, for example, have expressed an interest. So more groups, more volunteers, more support. Some of the trends we've seen in the report, youth volunteers are eager for experience to add to their resume, to get their hours that they need to graduate. So a volunteer coordinator would develop a youth engagement strategy to engage young youth and students. Older volunteers have experience and time to share, and so a volunteer coordinator would foster partnerships to support older adults to volunteer with city groups or existing groups. Concern for the environment is encouraging volunteerism. As we all experience more extreme heat events, floods, fires, it's spurring more people to want to do what they can. And so a volunteer coordinator would work with existing groups such as the Green Teams and others to connect Colwood citizens to meaningful opportunities, which again, we do a really good job of already, but it's in an ad hoc way without a single staff person to coordinate it together. So it's a community development opportunity. So we, as I say, are hearing lots of need for new groups to form. We have a good neighbor program that has been initiated, but not terribly well supported, that we could work more on. It's a great way for people to connect deeply with their neighbors and their neighborhoods, form more beneficial groups around shared interests that we're hearing about, and foster friendships, memories, all the good things we know about volunteering. So the recommendation tonight, I'll just revisit the fact that this plan did come to the previous council. They realized that it was a hefty ask, a big commitment, and referred it to this council as the new council. And so I'm here again to present it to you and ask that staff be directed to return with a budget amendment to support the mid-year hiring of a full-time volunteer coordinator, and that we would begin by engaging a consultant to help us with the first 5 steps to really shape the program in the ways described there. So I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So have a long history of volunteering with the city prior to actually running for and becoming a councillor. And I've seen 25 years of volunteer work here. And it's been very much back and forth. People volunteer for things that they love and find meaningful. And I have to say that they haven't always been rewarded with a full understanding of the roles that they take on and the things that they do. So it's really important to me that if we're going to spend the money, and it is a big ask, that it be that we are spending the money in a way that our volunteers feel is valuable. And that if we're asking people to volunteer, we're not asking them to work for free. We're asking them to indulge their passions. So that is really key to me. And so I don't want to disparage the efforts of our communications to follow through on something that council asked for. But I really feel that in looking at what we do and the groups that are in existence in our community, we need to let them lead the way and not take the top-down approach of, well, we need some people to do these things, so we'll get this. I'm hopeful that I actually thoroughly believe that every member around this table has great regard for the volunteers who come out and do all kinds of things, whether it's emergency services or cleanups or volunteering with making grads happen safely and successfully. There's all kinds of volunteering, but that we do it in a way that follows their lead rather than, dragging them in. Because when council initiates things, it has a tendency to stray into the political. And when we get into the political, that's a pretty uncomfortable place for a volunteer to be. They either get their legs cut off when somebody doesn't agree with them, or they get shut down when they bring up something that somebody doesn't want to hear. So I think we need to follow our volunteers and our nonprofit organizations and support them. And I'm trying to say this the kindest, nicest way possible. I think I appreciate the work, but I don't think this is the direction that we need to go.
Thanks very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship. A few questions. They may not be for you specifically, so I apologize in advance. It feels like this is something I want to support, and I start thinking about it, that we're jumping off the bridge here, full hog with a unionized position that is really for life. And I would love to see some middle ground here, and I wonder if you can speak to this. Can we not contemplate a trial with a part-time auxiliary staff member where we could do something with that if need be, if it didn't work out?
I believe that's a possibility. If that was council's direction, that we could find a way to support that.
Okay, thank you. Along the same lines and along Councillor Day's lines, or similar lines, is there not a community group that could perform this function on our behalf? We sit here and go through the grant and aid program. Is there not one of these community groups that would take this on for us? A volunteer coordinator of volunteers with a grant?
Again, that's something we could certainly explore. There are groups who do that, Volunteer Victoria being one. The direction we received from the previous council was to explore how the city would implement the plan. And so that's what this is, but there are certainly other avenues we'd be pleased to.
So it wasn't contemplated in this particular report, an opportunity like that?
That's not the way Volunteer Victoria designed this program for us, no.
And is there any other communities that are employing a volunteer community, a volunteer coordinator?
Yes, I believe Victoria and Saanich both do, but I would have to check that. Yeah.
And I can't read my writing on the last one, so you're off the hook. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report, thanks very much for this. And I was really quite surprised. Okay, so I went through a similar cycle of going, oh, we got to hop on board, support volunteers, who doesn't? But then again, I dug into the costs and the complexity of it and was sort of become concerned we're building another layer of bureaucracy, of course. However, the one thing that struck me in the report were the levels of direction and regulation and rules around safety and insurance, liability, and then the staffing relationships. What happens when a volunteer is, it's fabulous until there's an issue, a personnel issue I'm speaking to. It's all very sensitive stuff always. And in a volunteer organization, I think it's complicated by the fact that we don't have the normal human resources payroll or human resources structure. So in the report, there's a lot of that material, which I guess now with our do you call them ad hoc groups, the list of groups that we've got, we don't have those things structured. I'm not even sure how it gets dealt with. And I'm a bit concerned about what may happen if problems arise and where and who's responsible. So that is one thing that guides me toward feeling like we need a little more oversight or involvement. That aside, however, leaves me with a situation where right now we have a garden society that's begging to expand. I think the people, individuals involved, I'm speaking a bit ahead of myself, but they are at a certain level of capacity. So maybe we need another garden group and so on. And there's lots of places, as you are mentioning, for need for growth. I took on just a few days ago, I offered to take on an effort for another garden group in Colwood that is looking to get involved. And there's been some initial discussion with a developer and some, I believe Gordon Parks was involved, so that this could move forward. And I offered to help do that specifically with that one group. I haven't even spoken with you or anyone else yet. It's very early, but it's an example of how it grows with the existing structure without any costs, except of course the staff time. When I was first looking at it, I thought it would be nice to have a directory at City Hall that was updated perhaps quarterly, whereby as a living active directory, a real one, yellow pages for all things volunteer perhaps in the city, and whether we could manage to put something like that together. So new people coming to town could call up City Hall or drop in. They could be handed this document. We were at an event with just the other day at the Olympic View, and there's this like a visioning with the Western Chamber, and they gave what they refer to as their yellow page directory, and in it then lots of advertising, which helped pay for it all, I think. I don't know if we can do that, but anyway, it was a pretty nifty thing. And then in the end, it's like the last 5 pages, you actually get the meat of it, which are the businesses that are involved in it. Anyhow, that's how I'm thinking more in that regard, where the costs are still going to be there to some degree, but not anywhere close to what we're looking at and would be interested to see. However, Carol Brown spoke earlier to the fact that we need or would like to expand these park groups, and it starts to get big, right? Lots of people, it's a lot of work, and then the structures need to be there. So I'm a little bit torn, except that I don't think I can support the idea of hiring someone yet. I think we need to look at it a lot more and decide where to go from there. And I'd like the directory idea, perhaps.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Jordan.
Sandra, thanks for the report. I just wanted to, I guess I'm, you know, I think it's a good plan, but I feel like it's kind of backwards. Just because I'm not sure what the volunteers would be doing. Like I'm just not sure what we would be funding this person to do per se yet, I guess. It concerns me that we already have a lot of staff time, like for events and things, and we can't really produce any metrics or costs of what it costs the city for staff to attend those and to work those functions. So I just don't, I feel like we don't know what we don't know, and for, yeah, so for, I don't know. And I feel like I perhaps could have given better direction when this came to budget deliberations in February, because, you know, I think you spelled it out quite clearly, what was involved in this and what the costs were going to be. And here it is. And we knew. So I just think that maybe there was a missed opportunity to kind of guide it in a different direction. So yeah, I don't think I can support it at this time, but yeah, but thank you.
Thank you. I'd be happy to provide event costs at some point too, if you'd like that.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Sandra. Appreciate it. Yeah, I don't think this is new information. We've seen it, but I think my concern really has less to do with, the information you've brought forward and the concept as it does, timing. Great plan, bad timing, in the sense that we've put a budget in place, we've put a tax number in place, and to insert something in the middle to me doesn't sit well. I was interested in Councillor Jansen's comments around perhaps looking at some other ways to approach this, work subsidies, internships, for example, with, various universities, colleges. Is it a part-time position? Could it be a seasonal position? I was looking on Indeed, for example, kind of the main job board, and there's a wide variety of volunteer coordinator positions, Saanich Volunteer Services, BC Children's Hospital, Sunshine Coast Municipality, Fraser Health, and so on. And most of them are part-time, which I found interesting. That those that are full-time, though, whether you prorate the part-time amount or take the full-time amount, they ranged from, about 45,000 on a 1.0 FTE basis up to about 81,000 on the same full-time basis. So, lower cost to begin with. So I wonder if our benchmark, if it's, and again, this is the difference between private and public and not knowing what we can do. I wonder if the position is at too elevated a spot within our structure. But anyway, my thought would be to take it back and see if we can look for some alternatives here, like I say, in terms of interns and other things, and then make sure, if we feel strongly that this is the route to go, that it's, presented up front and we're ready to include it in the budget for the next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, for putting this report together. And I think we all realize that this, volunteering is not all about picking up garbage and cleaning up parks. There's so many different avenues here. And I've had a lot of experience in my past work of working with volunteer coordinators, and I understand and appreciate that it is a lot of work. But I do feel like maybe we're jumping a little bit too quickly, and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all of the information and not ready to make a decision on this. However, my question would be, can we identify where the need is immediately for volunteers? So again, possibly seasonally, and recruit and manage these sort of in-house for the time being?
I mean, I think that's something we could explore. It happens to some degree already. The example we heard from Carol Brown about Friends of Havenwood, our parks team is doing this kind of support sort of off the side of their desk now. Not all of our teams or staff members are as comfortable mentoring and would like to know that they're part of a program that provides for volunteers in all the ways we've described. So we could certainly explore ways to implement it. I think if we're going to implement a strong program, we need somebody assigned to doing that, whether it's an external organization, whether it's an intern, whether it's a part-time, but there needs to be a central person assigned to it. With that in mind, I think we could explore a lot of avenues.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it would be, I know for myself, I would like to see some different options, whether it's part-time employment or seasonal. I think the investment level is what I'm really uncomfortable with here at this point. I'd be open to looking at some other options if that's a possibility.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I guess I'll wrap it up then. So you probably know how I feel about this already. I'm not a fan of it. And it's not, one thing I just absolutely hate doing is crushing any passion and enthusiasm, good initiative. The plan is a well thought out plan. That's not even a question to me. What it comes down to, how I always look at this is a significant cost. And it's it's priorities, I guess, you know, and we haven't even finished our strategic planning yet. And so, you know, to me, we're aiming at something, we're firing a shotgun right now. We're not taking that rifle shot right now. So I can't support it just because of the fact that it's a big ask. And you know what, I mean, I wouldn't get rid of the plan. I'd make sure you kept it because it's very well thought out. It's just that I just do not think, this is personally me speaking, it's just not affordable. You know, if I look at all the other priorities that we have on our books. Anyways, that's my last thought, and seeing no other comments, I will call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation, please stick up your hand. All in favor?
Your worship,
Yes.
I am unclear if there's a motion on the table.
Yeah, okay. So the motion right now is that staff be directed return with a budget amendment to support the mid-year hiring of a full-time volunteer coordinator, and that staff be directed to engage a consultant to undertake the first 5 steps of the plan, document priorities, identify partners, review existing policies, identify volunteer assignments, develop guidelines and tools, and identify onboarding and training needs. That's the recommendation. Oh, shoot. Good point. We didn't even have the motion. Should have probably had that. Anyone wish to make the motion? Not seeing it. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Good point. Councillor Jensen.
I would like to suggest an amended motion along the lines of the discussions that I heard this evening, and it's a simple motion that that we look to partner with a community group to deliver an effective volunteer program.
Okay, do I have a seconder on that? Yeah, I don't see a seconder. Councillor Jensen. That one just disappeared too, sorry. Thank you. Okay, 9.3. Jen Hepting, Director of Finance, Alternative Tax Collection, Property Tax Penalty. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. The purpose of the briefing before you tonight is to give council an option to consider adjusting how the city levies the property tax penalty. As you know, by legislation, we are required to levy a 10% penalty. Council does have the ability to alter how we levy this penalty. The briefing provides a little background on how municipalities throughout our region are currently levying this penalty. We're about split. About half of us levy a 5% penalty immediately following the due date, and then a second 5% penalty. The city of Colwood, we levy a 10% immediately following the due date. Wanted to get this briefing before you tonight to give this council an opportunity to either confirm our current practice or to put an alternative tax collection scheme in place by bylaw. That bylaw has been drafted, is on the agenda tonight for first 3 readings. Pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Jen here, or CFO. I'm just wondering about the motivation behind it. Just out of curiosity, like, is this something that CFOs meet annually and kind of say, okay, we're doing it this way, we're doing it that way? I mean, I understand if we've gone through the effort to draft a potential bylaw, obviously there's some feeling behind it or belief that this is potentially the right direction to go. And quite honestly, as a neophyte in that area, I'm looking for some guidance, I think, from the subject matter expert on why we're talking about it.
Certainly through the mayor, I appreciate that question. The last time I really explored this was in 2020. There was legislation put in place immediately following the state of emergency. And so we did alter our penalty that year. In terms of CFOs checking in, we certainly do, not every year. This year, I would say motivation was almost split. One, I haven't had this conversation with this council. I have had a conversation with the previous council. And second, there's been a lot of conversations just about rising costs, affordability, that sort of thing. And so it was a good opportunity to just connect with CFOs in the region, see currently where everybody is with their property tax penalty. And we are split. 7 municipalities are doing a 5-5 split. The 6 of us are doing a 10%. And so the information is before you. If council does nothing, we will proceed with the 10% penalty levied the day following the property tax due date.
Sorry, I did have a second part of my question, so I kept it going. I was wondering, obviously there's a financial ramification from making the change. You know, it's slight, but it's there. It's still relevant. And I'd wondered if there was an offset, like if in fact the 10% it results in a number of complaints annually, if there's a, you know, a staff issue with community perception, that kind of thing.
Certainly through the mayor. Absolutely, there are financial implications associated with whether or not we adjust this penalty. Those are outlined in the briefing. We currently do rely on the funding that our penalty generates, and we utilize that to fund our Sustainable Infrastructure Reserve Fund transfer. So this year's budget, about $140,000. We believe if we were to alter that penalty, we would see a decrease anywhere between 90,000 to 60,000, just depending on this year's behavior. If you speak to any member of our tax collection team, absolutely every year there are complaints. It is a steep penalty, 10% on the current balance owing. We spoke earlier this year about what a representative property pays. And so these aren't small penalties. They're absolutely, when we have property owners moving from other jurisdictions, from other provinces, they're not as familiar. Property tax due date is that business day following July 2nd, not uncommon, folks are out of town, that sort of thing. And so inevitably every year we will have some upset ratepayers at the front counter. And this is a legislative penalty. We do not have the authority to waive it. So we do work every year to communicate this penalty out. It is well stated on our website. It's well stated on our property tax notices. But there is always an opportunity to just ensure that our ratepayers are aware of when that deadline is.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think it is a very good thing that we're talking about this. And I think particularly in light of a lot of the financial pressures that are on homeowners, particularly because when you have a change in status, if you will, a young family paying their mortgage, generally their taxes are with their mortgage and they're not maybe paying as close attention. People who are, as you say, moving from other provinces may not be as aware. But when that status changes, say you're in the lucky enough position to have paid off your mortgage, and you may not realize that now you have to think about paying your taxes yourself. So it is a very steep penalty, and it is, I was curious, but it probably doesn't really matter what the statistics really are. But I mean, people who end up having to pay the penalty because, you know, they forgot, they were out of town, they didn't know, whatever the reason is. It might be interesting to know, you know, maybe they pay that off in 2 weeks or a month or 2 months. I don't know what those statistics might be, but it is a very steep penalty. And at least in my experience in working in house transfer, title transfers, people aren't always as aware of all the things that go into it. So I think it's a benefit, especially given mortgage rates have been going up and people are having difficulties and everything is tight these days, that having the benefit of a lower penalty for if you simply didn't get the memo and didn't know that you needed to pay those on this particular date, and then subsequently you're paying a 10% penalty, that can be a very, very big penalty. It's not gosh, I didn't pay my bill on time, so it's an extra $20 or an extra $50. This is hundreds of dollars. And so I think it's important that we do the best we can. So, and I realize there will be an impact to our budget, but we don't want a windfall from people's misfortune. We'd like to fund our sustainable infrastructure in a proper and appropriate way. So I would like to suggest that we should do the 5 and 5 routine and tip the scales to at least make it as the least painful we can make it for people. And hopefully that they don't end up having difficulty paying their taxes or end up in a tax sales situation.
Thank you very much. Jen, just a quick question. What percentage of the people actually pay on time?
Pre-pandemic, it was approximately 98% of our property taxes were paid by the due date.
Okay.
2020, 21, 22, that percentage has dropped. Last year, I believe we were hovering around 90%. So on average, when we look at the last 5 years, it's about 95% of our property tax levy is paid by the due date. So the vast majority, this is not a concern and not subject to the penalty.
So would it be a stretch? I know how CFOs are. And would it be a stretch if you even did something different? Even, I don't know if you're allowed to do this, if this is within the legislation, but what if you were the adjudicator on it? You listen to the reason. Is that too much work then? If we're just talking, if you're talking 95% are on time, and I mean, sometimes some of the reasons are phenomenal reasons, sometimes they're just bad reasons. Or is that just too much of a stretch? It's going to create a lot of work for you, I would assume.
Thank you, Your Worship. Direct answer, illegal for the tax collector to adjudicate property tax collection. Penalty is legislated. Council may by bylaw alter what our penalty amount is and when we levy it, but ultimately whatever is put in place by legislation or an alternative tax collection bylaw, that is what we follow. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines, if you're going to apply the 10% or, 5 and 5 sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah, I was fishing on a fishing trip there. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, well, let's, so the motion is, the motion in actual fact is you either, you make the motion for Appendix 1, which is basically leave it as is, which is the 10% the day after. And Appendix 2, according to the reading, is the draft, the new one, which is 5% day after and 5% September 1st, I believe, right? Do I have September 1st or September 30th?
If I may, Your Worship, we have drafted a bylaw 1993, which is on your agenda. You're correct. There is no staff recommendation before you with this briefing. Should council wish to put a change in place, bylaw 1993 is drafted 5% penalty immediately following the due date, a second 5% penalty following September 30th.
Okay, is that clear with everybody? So does someone want to make a motion then? Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. So, sorry, I just clarifying. I see that bylaw 1993, which is the 5 and 5, is on the agenda as item 10.1. So, doing nothing is in effect endorsing the 5 and 5.
No, doing nothing is leaving the bylaw as is. That's 1820. Because that's why we're approving 1993 going for first, second, and third reading.
Right,
If
but
we
it's
say,
on the agenda as 1993.
Your Worship, if I may?
oh, please, yes.
Thank you. If council wants to leave it at 10%, strike 10.1 from the agenda. If council wants to change to 5 and 5, give 10.1 3 readings.
Okay, that's what I said. You were more succinct though, Mr. Earl. Yeah, what you said, okay. So but we still need a motion, right, for 9.3, I would assume, no?
And I would recommend at this juncture that council move to 10.1.
Okay. 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 We'll move to 10.1. Bylaw number 1993, alternative tax collection scheme, first, second, and third reading. And again, let's clarifying that, that's 5% the day after, and then 5%, the other 5% on September 30th. Okay. Councillor Day. Discussion.
I'm moving 3 readings.
Okay, we'll have a seconder. Okay, Councillor Grove. Discussion. Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank your worship. Based on what I heard here this evening, I'm not unsympathetic, but clearly the word is out. If we're 95, 98 percentile, I think we're, muddling in something that appears to be working just fine at this point in time, and I'm going to be opposed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Olson. Whoops. Okay.
Sorry, I turned it off. I actually have, I agree with Councillor Jansen. I feel like if we're getting a good return rate and people are paying their taxes, if we go to the 5 and 5, my concern is that we might see some of those slip. Just people waiting. So I would oppose this as well.
Councillor Jordison.
I just wanted to, this happened to me. So I just wanted to explain the situation, to tell you that it is easy to happen without meaning to not pay your taxes. So I pay them myself monthly. I take money and I transfer it over, and I had the equation down wrong, and I had called the staff office to get the number I was at, and I made the last payment thinking I had paid it all, got a 10% bill on the remaining that I had owing. So thinking I had paid it, all of it, but I hadn't, just the calculations got messed up, and it was just an accident. So of course I didn't make a big deal about it. I paid it. It's my fault, but these things do happen. So I don't know. We're in a more difficult time. And I just think that if you get it once at 5%, you don't do it again. But if you get it at 10%, and it's just, I don't know. I think if you're going to get to the second 5%, then, you're there. But if you can prevent that from happening to people, I think that's important. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so Councillor Jordison, Councillor Grove, and Councillor Day. All those opposed? Oh. Okay, so those that are opposed, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Olson, Councillor Ward, and Mayor Kobayashi. Okay, so motion fails. Bylaw number 1989, land use bylaw amendment 2054-2076, Sioux Road, first and second reading. Before I move on this item here, I forgot that I should have paused here. I didn't know if anyone wanted to speak to this before. I think everyone spoke when they wanted to speak. Does anyone want to speak to this item right now? Please.
Hello, Mayor and council people. My name is Ivan Weeb. My wife, Erin Weeb. We own 506 Nelly Place, and unfortunately, my neighbor had to leave because she had to put her child to bed, so she wasn't. She's not here to speak on her behalf, but I would like to speak on her behalf, knowing her situation. Is we are not fans of the prospect of having such a large building so close to our property line, looking into our yards. it's very concerning and it's, well, it's kept me up at night and I know it's kept my wife up at night. When we bought our house, we bought it for a specific reason. Anyways, I don't want to go on because we've already submitted a letter, but we are deeply against this rezoning application. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Does anyone else wish to speak to this?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Craig Bicky. I live at 2841 Acacia Drive. My wife sent a letter on both our behalves. We moved into the neighborhood in 2004. And ever since then, it's been a great community, small. It's got a real true family vibe, cul-de-sac, people look out for one another. And then it just feels like what you guys are trying to do, or the potential to do, is just doesn't really go with the whole Colwood feel of family. I mean, first off, the traffic and what's happened at the corner of Acacia and Souk Road it's got its challenges, to say the least, pulling off Souk Road to Acacia every day. I mean, if we're gonna pretty much compound that times 10 of what the potential is on Souk Road, it's just gonna make a complete nightmare. I mean, on top of that, I couldn't even imagine what a bicyclist would have to deal with going through that. So I just really wish you guys would reconsider a 6-story building. I mean, when you look at what's gone on in Souk Road with a couple of 3 stories, I mean, there is, other things that are available. Plus, having a 6-story building looking in on our yards that for 20 years we've never had. I don't feel that that's right. And what about the people that have lived there with our houses? Where's the voice that we have? So I guess what I'm really imploring is you guys just give it a second thought. And I just don't feel that this is really goes with what Colwood's about, especially when you see what's gone on Souk Road and the precedent's been set. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? It's and I'm very empathetic to what you've had to say. And I read the emails that have come in, and it's just a real tough one because of the fact that we have this document called the OCP. And, we are in compliance with our OCP, and it's a tough one. It really is. And like I said, I really sincerely mean that. I'm very empathetic to it. It's like my neighborhood, I've got things popping up, built tall buildings around me that are popping up all over the place. But, I guess if I took the time to read the OCP, of course, the OCP didn't exist when I bought my place either. So, but it's tough. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just would like to speak to the safety of the road. That is a major issue. There was a major accident there years ago that caused a lot of reconstruction of the road before the Ministry of Highways dropped it onto Colwood's lap to deal with. It's still a problem. It's going to be a problem. And the traffic flow is unbelievably fast. And a lot of numbers are coming through there. And even some of the more recent infrastructure that's been added, like the Brooks School. I watched somebody turning left into that area not very long ago, and they were very lucky to survive it. So it's been an area that was fraught. It's one of the reasons why the road to the old church was closed, is because there have been deadly accidents. So I will not be supporting this, and I won't be supporting it for a few reasons. We don't know how we're going to handle the traffic We don't know where the sewer units are coming from, and we don't know where the water is coming from yet even. So we seem to be making plans without all the right ingredients in place.
Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I had a few questions on this before I decide whether I'm going to support it or not. And I just wonder who the best people to answer that might be, whether that's staff or, and it relates to traffic and zoning and the OCP. Thanks, Jasmine. First off, you heard from some of the residents who were here today. Can you talk or can we speak about what the traffic management plan is or potentially would be? I mean, I understand this is a rezoning and we're not talking specifically about the particular building, but I believe some of the questions that arose behoove some kind of answer.
Yes, and probably John Rosenberg is most able to speak to the TIA because his team reviews it. So I'll let him tackle that one.
Thanks.
Hello, Your Worship. Hello, Your Worship, through to Councillor Jensen. We've seen the TIA. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, John.
We've seen the TIA. Currently, the restrictions for the development would be right in and right out only. Most of that suit corridor, any kind of time there's a development, it would be right in or right out only. We haven't looked at any kind of physical restriction with regards to preventing that left turn movement, but that's certainly part of it. Moving forward, if that was the desire of council. I would think that yes, on occasion, somebody would make that right turn into Acacia and then turn around and come back out to make a legal left. Otherwise, they'd have to head down and make a right onto Kelly and then up onto VMP and out that way. They could make a left further up the road and then turn around and come back again as well. So there's different movements, but currently we would not add an extra lane in there. We certainly wouldn't allow a left turn in or out in that area.
Thank you. And there is no traffic that's going to go down Acacia, is there? This is all enters and exits onto Souk Road, is that right?
That is correct. One entrance on Souk Road. All units will turn right onto Souk Road when leaving in the AM peak.
And we heard concerns about setbacks, and I'm sure this is Jasmine. Thank you, John. Concerns about setbacks, whether it be the Arbor Memorial property or whether it be some of the neighboring properties. And can we speak about that? There was concerns raised about the height of the building and some of the privacy. What are the setback considerations for this piece of property? And has the proponent adjusted or prepared to adjust their building to help the neighborhood out?
Yes, so I think we've spoken to this at the Planning and Land Use Committee, and then we've chatted with council as we've progressed this application forward about how this application and others along Souk Road have prompted us to evaluate the criteria that we use to do a 6-story. What type of property and what type of setbacks and what considerations should be placed on development for them to understand when a 6-story is appropriate and what does integrating respectfully into a neighborhood of 1 or 2-story single family homes would look like. There is no doubt that a 6-story in a neighborhood of single family is a difficult adjacency. The transit growth area in the official community plan does not contemplate single family homes along that Souk Road corridor in the future. I think that is ultimately the reality. That single family home is not a vision for that corridor into the future. So we are trying to very carefully recognize what is there and move it into a transitional period where these will become our growth area, where we will want to intensify the height and density to support rapid transit into Colwood, further past Coldstream and Well. So we are doing every effort we can to look at a zone and consider every element within a zone. So a land use bylaw has considerations of lot coverage, setbacks, maximum height, maximum density. And this transit growth area has carefully considered each and every one of those aspects and made concessions to enable a more suitable 6 stories. So we have implemented through this transit growth area a setback, not only a setback for the building, but a setback for an underground parkade, precisely to create bigger enhanced buffers of landscaping that could support a more robust landscape buffer. We have also implemented setbacks for the upper stories of a building. So it's not just a one simple setback, it's actually a setback for underground structure and upper 2 stories. We have also looked at lot coverage that other developers have challenges on as to whether it's too small or it would pose challenges. And we've carefully determined that that lot coverage was appropriate to implement the maximum permitted density of 2.5 FAR, and it would give us a massing and scale that would be suitable. So we have looked at it very carefully. It is, I very much like the mayor mentioned, like we don't dismiss the feelings of residents because it is true. It is a hard adjacency. It is a hard thing to blend. And we just recognize that this is a transition period for Souk Road that will have to accommodate uncomfortable adjacencies until the corridor transitions into its highest and best use, which is a higher density. In this particular location, with such a close proximity to the Galloping Goose, to extensive parklands in the Royal Roads, University, and in such a close proximity to our transit exchange, where we have the only rapid transit connection in Colwood, it makes sense to support a 6-story apartment building. And it doesn't come without its many challenges with the residents speaking to them and the staff and the applicant doing the best that we can to mitigate. And the applicant has worked with us and collaborated. Some of the plans that are included in the initial reports haven't been updated to even reflect those enhanced setbacks, or this is not a point at which we do a review for forming character. We just do the blunt parameters, height, setback, maximum lot coverage. And then we take that forward and work with the applicant and their architect team and polish the edges and give it aesthetic that we feel meets the design guidelines in the official community plan.
Thank you. One further, Jasmine, in some of the correspondence that we received, there was concerns raised about decoupling the assigned parking spot with the suite from the suite.
Mm-hmm.
Is that realistic? Is that happening? Or are we going to regulate that in some form or another, or do we have the authority to do it? Or I'd love some feedback on that.
So past rezoning, we don't have an authority to regulate how people manage parking on private property. But when it's made a condition of rezoning, then the mechanism through which you compel that action is a Section 219 covenant. So it's a legal agreement of how council expects that parking to be managed. So the staff recommendation that went to the Planning and Land Use Committee originally was proposing to keep the parking and the units together. So bundle it. So basically that when you rent a unit, that unit comes with the parking stall that you are required to provide, if it's a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom, whatnot. The Planning and Land Use Committee made some good points and effectively asked staff to provide best practice. So best practice to support active transportation and to shift away from a car-oriented. Best practice would be to not bundle it and to let almost like the market dictate whomever needs a parking spot can pay for it, and whomever is not needing it, kind of let the market sort it out on its own. But
I like it. But I think we've seen the results. If you give people the option, they'll take the lesser rent and then, plant their car on the street, which may be a concern for the backside of this property, which I'm assuming there'll probably be some, I'm not sure if there'll be some access from the rear or not, but you can see a situation where cars are being parked along Acacia Drive and people walking to their unit because they don't want to pay the extra $100. So I would far prefer to see the unit and the parking spot coupled together. And then if said tenant decides to throw their parking spot that they're not using into the market, I think we accomplished kind of the same thing as what you're talking about in a different way. You probably tell me how I'm wrong, but that's fine.
no, I think maybe the applicant is here tonight and maybe he wants to make his case. Like when we went to the Land Use and Planning Committee, staff had one position, but we were fair to let the applicant also establish his position from his, they manage these rental properties and have some experience. And so we've seen it in Greater Victoria manage both ways, where council dictates and gets involved, where it doesn't. This would be the first time that in Colwood we impose a way to manage, kind of to bundle the units. But I think maybe it is for the applicant to make the case for the
Thank you.
alternative.
I would love to hear from the applicant if they have something to say in that regard. But further to that, Jasmine, just for us as a community, we've seen the flip side to this adjacent another building complex nearby, and it's causing concerns for residents on the street because people are opting to not spend the extra 100 or 200 a month for their parking spot. So if the applicant wants to speak to any of this, that's great. And then I will yield your worship and hopefully hear from someone else.
Maybe one comment on Colwood Corners. So because they have a mixed use development with ample surface parking, I think the fact that they hadn't imposed a pay for parking scheme for commercial lent itself very well for residents of those units to think, well, there's nothing wrong with parking in that parking lot. There's no repercussions to using your own residential parking. In the case of the particular development that we're speaking to on Souk Road, there is no way to overflow anywhere. Like Royal Roads has a pay parking scheme. The parking for the cemetery is evidently private and not accessible, and there's very limited on-street parking availability. So I think anyone that rents in that building would know there isn't very much parking elsewhere that one could rely on within proximity.
So while I still have you here, a comment made by Councillor Day, this is just threw me for it was like someone threw a slider here. Councillor Day said something about not enough water and not enough Sewage? What does
Maybe
that
I'll,
mean?
I'll let John speak to that, but my understanding is that there's sewer and water on Soup Road.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I can, we haven't seen a direct application with CRD water, but it would be my assumption. There's transmission mains on Souk Road, so I wouldn't have an issue with regards to volume of water needed being provided there, but we haven't seen anything technically from the CRD at this juncture. And from a sewer perspective, we have the ability to provide sewer as well.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Grove?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just, I mean, I've been listening obviously to all of the issues here, and it sort of keeps going around in circles and things. We don't seem to come to a happy ending with much of this. The one that concerns me the most, as it did in the last meeting when this first came to council, was the road left, right in, right out. I think it's already causing issues with the townhomes just near, right next to Acacia. I've seen it myself driving on the road and seen it create a kind of an emergency braking kind of scenario where cars pull out and then immediately at speed do a U-turn in the middle of a busy road. To add to that, I think makes it worse. So at the time, I thought maybe a roundabout at Mount View or some such might help that. Obviously, it's not a prime solution, but the problem with traffic is that we've got this main corridor where we're trying to keep the traffic flowing at some speed. The speed limit is 50. I don't think that if you do less than 65, anybody lets you do that because you're piling up behind you. I know most cars are doing at least 70 along there in my experience. So we have an issue with speeding, with traffic flowing. People are in a hurry, they're moving through Colwood, and it comes back to conversations about the road. The other thing is that with that transit corridor, and then we have this tall building with the residential behind it, creates what I think they call a zoning wall. And that isn't a fun thing, but does happen a lot. I mean, when I look it up, I see it just Googling it. There's many, many examples of that happening all over, especially North America, I guess. But the solutions to it, I don't know, except that the proponent, I think, needs to come up with some really super deluxe privacy solutions to that problem, perhaps the right in, right out problem, as well as the new one I saw today with the Memorial Gardens and their concerns about the relationship there. When the developer comes in, we don't want to push development away because we need the housing, and it's a perfect location. Right next to Royal Roads, which as student numbers hopefully start rebounding, then we're going to need it for that as well. And so that's not a question. The appropriateness of single family homes on Souk Road, I think, we're in different times. So that part makes perfect sense to me, that density, it's the right place to build it. However, I think we need some serious, whether it's just a 4-story structure or whether it's a more significant privacy barrier structures around this particular building. I don't know the answer. I'd be looking forward to seeing some answers, design ideas. I'm not a property designer or architect, obviously. The other question was kind of about Peace Park. Is that included with this property, or is it still going to survive? I see on the drawing, the map here, it looks like it exists. That's the pathway from Nellie Place through to Souk Road.
Yes, so the park will remain unimpacted, so it's city dedicated park.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next thing is, if we approve this, what you're looking for tonight, that moves it into a process where there'll be appropriate hearings and opportunities for people to contribute.
So tonight was the public hearing, like conversation with the community. So they were invited to provide council with their comment and feedback before you give it first reading. So today was the invitation for the community to come and express their concerns and comments for you to consider before any readings is given.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Georgeson.
I just have some questions, I guess. I'm wondering what's impeding making the traffic situation a better situation? Like, is it typical that we fill Souk Road with 6-story buildings and they all can only turn right? Like, is that where the way we're moving? Like, I don't understand why, what is impeding fixing that? Like, is that a typical way that we build, or we fix things when we have to? I don't have experience with a bunch of apartment buildings on a street, but I just wonder, like, what are the other options? Or why can't there be other options?
Maybe I should leave it to John, but maybe I will state, I think we're thinking of Souk Road as it sits today and as we've have used it for many, many decades. But we are building Souk Road the way Mackenzie functions, the way the Broadway corridor functions. Like, it is a primary corridor where, like, if you think of yourself going on the Broadway corridor, would you do a U-turn? You just don't do your next right and try again and go around and figure out. But the way in which arterials are treated, you don't enable left-ins arbitrarily. It causes a lot of challenges, like we see on Island Highway, kind of trying to wait for left-ins at random intervals. But I will leave it to John because he's the expert. I just think of it as the land use that enables that pattern on Broadway, Mackenzie, large arterial.
That was actually pretty good for a non-expert, Jasmine. It is a difficult situation, and it is basically going to be right turn in, right turn out on Souk Road, unless council were to make a significant change from any discussions historically in town. Previous council and the transportation committee saw a Souk Road corridor study that talked about cross sections on Souk Road from 26-meter right of way all the way up to a 34-meter right of way. That transportation committee happened last June, and at that time staff were basically asked by the committee to look deeper into a 30-meter right of way. So we're doing that, and council will be seeing in the very near future some options with regards to Souk corridor and the discussions on what that cross section can look like. And that cross section can be really anything that council wants to envision. But the consequences of the decisions made there will be extremely consequential depending on what is chosen. And it'll range from 4 lanes of car traffic and 2 dedicated bus lanes, all the way down to just 2 lanes of traffic and 2 dedicated bus lanes. If council was to choose something like that, then you probably could use a 3rd lane on either side to allow left-ins or left-outs or some kind of merge lane. But with the volumes of traffic on Souk Road within the region being, I haven't seen a recent count, but I would have to guess it'd be in excess of 20,000 cars a day. It would be devastating to vehicular movement. Not that that can't happen. There has been other decisions made along the Island Highway corridor where it has gone down to 2 lanes of traffic. So council will see something in, I believe, the July 10th meeting, perhaps, with regards to some Souk Road cross sections. And at that time, there certainly could be a fulsome discussion on the cross section. But as it currently sits and works, left turns out of any of those developments definitely would cause pandemonium for sure.
Thank you, John. I just had one other follow-up question. I'm not even sure I want to go there, but Councillor Ward earlier mentioned a tenant displacement assistance and that sort of thing, and the rationale behind that. And I realize we have an OCP. I'm not really sure if people knew what that OCP meant when they were suggesting what they were suggesting, that it would upheaval neighborhoods that have been there for a long time. I think I heard a gentleman here earlier that said he lived there for 44 years. Like, where is, and I know we're being forced by the provincial government to do this. And this is just the reality, and it's supposedly the right location along the transit corridor. But, you know, typically when you've lived in your neighborhood for a long time, does anybody know what happens to their house values when you put a chunk of apartment buildings right beside it? And, you know, when these people, like, where's our concern for our residents that were there and have been there for that long? I realize we need to change, and things change and evolve, and we can't stand still with our city. But I just wish there was I guess I have a lot of empathy. The same sort of, maybe not the same sort of thing, but happened in our neighborhood. And I just, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just the way cities evolve and that sort of thing. But I just find it's disturbing that the residents there, you know, are facing this. There seems to be a lot of upset about it, and with the parking and the traffic and all that, I could just see people parking all up and down the street, and it's just a nightmare. But I don't really have a question. I'm just concerned for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry, Yasmin, I'll speak through the chair to you, but to council and residents as well. I think a lot of things to consider. First of all, it's time to talk about parking in Colwood. You know, I want to address some of the resident concerns that came by letter, which is that, you know, you would see people walking through and parking on Acacia, for example. And I think, you know, inherently people need to understand that street parking is subsidized, and street parking doesn't belong to residents. Now, I know that's a contentious thing to put out there. I park out front of my own home sometimes, but you know, that's the reality of it. Now, we can mitigate that though. We can do things that haven't been done in Colwood before. We can have resident registration. So in this particular example, you don't live on Acacia, you can't park there except for a couple of visitor sections. So there are solutions that are deployed in cities globally that, you know, we need to start thinking as a bit of a bigger city, particularly when looking at development of this scale. So some of the issues that have been raised, when you take them piece by piece, you can address them. So resident registration for parking on streets is something that's long overdue, I think, in Colwood, and we're going to need a conversation about that fairly soon. So that's one item. I think, you know, I too am really empathetic. I'd echo what Councillor Jordison said. I mean, I had a 5-story building go up right next door to me that I was vehemently opposed to. That's no secret. I was really angry about it. It was supposed to be a 1-story building, you know, but I've come to terms with it. It's there now, and I live with it. My assessment went up 23%. Statistically, putting a condo building up doesn't necessarily drop real estate values. That's the proverbial old spouse's tale, we'll call it. So we need to ground ourselves in facts and data when we're making a decision like this. So, you know, there's some shadow issues. We know that. There's privacy issues. We know that. The Land Use and Planning Committee viewed pretty comprehensive documentation on what those shadows looked like, you know, where they would fall. Unfortunately, we don't have minutes from the May 1st meeting available to council right now, at least not to me, that I can't find from the Land Use and Planning Committee that would have perhaps shown council some of the answers to your questions about the impact on nearby residents. You know, from what I've seen, we look at 6 homes that directly border the back of the property in terms of actually touching it. 7 if you include Hatley Memorial next door. There's an additional 4 or 5 that are impacted to some degree by the shadow, depending on where it falls throughout the year. And I think that was weighed in when a committee of citizens on the Land Use and Planning Committee made the difficult decision to kind of advance it forward. I mean, this is 12, 13, 14 homes impacted by the structure, and then a cul-de-sac that is impacted by traffic. And we have to also make a decision with 20,000 people in mind. And Councillor Jordison made a very valid point, which I've been making publicly and will continue to talk about, that the provincial government is going to take away our ability to make any decisions if we don't make the right decisions. When a project conforms with our OCP, as difficult a decision as it is, we are honor bound to at least really deeply consider the objections, even when we're sitting across from people who will be impacted, much like I was impacted with the 5-story building next to me. I was angry. I was angry at Councillor Jansen, you know, everybody on council, right? I mean, it personally impacted. I know how you feel. And I know in this moment, it's challenging when you're sitting there thinking, which way is this person going? But, you know, it worked out. Did I love it? No. Are there privacy issues to some extent? Are there shadow issues? Yes, to some extent. But, you know, looking at it as from the greater good of the community now, I understand where it is. We have, if we don't allow development on the Souk Road corridor and in other areas where the OCP specifically calls for it, where will we allow it? And at what point do we simply put up our hands and say, you know what, Mr. Premier, let your housing advisor and the rest of the team just take over, because we're going to abdicate our responsibility at this table. So those are some of my issues. You know, in a perfect world, we never would have seen a cul-de-sac come off an arterial road, right? Acacia should punch through to, you know, to Glencairn Lane and everybody should come out Mountain View, but that ship has sailed, right? We can't change the mistakes of a generation ago. So we have to make the decision that's before us right now. So, you know, I listened to the folks on the Land Use and Planning Committee. I sat where Mr. Mayor is at the moment, and these are citizens that live in Colwood. They're taxpayers as well, and they went through all of the same discussions we're having with a little bit more information, and this is the route that they chose to take. It was a unanimous decision to push it forward. So, you know, I also have to consider what message do we send to those residents whose voice is very much equal here. So I very reluctantly feel that I need to support the proposal. My only caveat is traffic. I have a real issue with the traffic. I'd like to see a traffic study and how we're going to deal with this in that awkward growing phase between where we are today and, as Yasmin has indicated, where we are in a future state, maybe well beyond my term on council. So, but that's my 2 cents anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just had one additional comment, and it was with regards to the parking, and that parking is becoming increasingly an issue through every existing older community that has a new development pop up close to them. I'm hearing about it everywhere, and it is an issue. It's not about owning the street. In fact, you know, I often wish that people would make space for their own vehicles on their own properties so that they aren't parking in the middle of the road sometimes. But in spite of all that, if we don't get our parking mix right as developments come in, then that parking doesn't exist, and it becomes very expensive for everybody else in Colwood to have to initiate a system where we have a staff person who registers people's plate numbers, where we have bylaw officers who go around and issue tickets. And it's a road that I had really hoped we would not have to go down, that we could insist that our new developments had adequate parking and adequate services, that they didn't have dangerous entries and exits, that people routinely ignore the rules because they can in terms of following the process. We should not be having new developments come in with unsafe planning for our traffic and transportation, and with no plan for parking that addresses people's real needs. And if you know, I do not believe that this 1 6-story building is going to single-handedly enable transit growth on Souk Road. It won't. It's going to take a lot of things coming together, and it won't happen all at once. But for my part, I will not be voting for things that don't respect the rights of the existing residents.
Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be brief. I'm going to be opposed to this motion and I'm conflicted, but I'll tell you why. First off, and I want to be fair to the residents that are here in the room. I'm not even remotely, well, I'm not opposed to the configuration of the building, the size, the number of units. I think there's a way we can make that work in the neighborhood, but the part that I have a problem with here is the traffic. We know when we had lengthy discussions about Souk Road, I think it might have been in the last term, Mr. Mayor, but that portion in front of Royal Roads, we know is the most compressed portion of Souk Road. And meanwhile, transit is trying to plan a 5th lane there for buses and perhaps bicycles for the future. I don't have the benefit of seeing that in front of me and understanding implicitly what this development may have on that design. It's for those reasons, and because of that, I'm going to oppose it. And it really has nothing to do with the building or the structure or the configuration. So I am going to be opposed for that reason and that reason alone. Thank you.
I'll call it out for you if you'd like. So 10, did you call out the motion for the other one that it was passed? Thank you. So 10.3 is sewer local area service enlargement amendment bylaws going for first, second, and third readings. Bylaw 1991, which is Colwood Main Sewer for 515 Carindale Road, and bylaw 1992, Colwood West Sewer 515 Carindale.